Welcome back to Changing America. When we talk about women and diversity in tech, the same names come up again and again. Melissa Meyer, Sheryl Sandberg. But what are the women of color in Silicon Valley? Where are they? And how do we realize that it's not just women that improve the industry's diversity problem, it's hiring women of color? Joining me to discuss this is the founder of Black Girls Code, Kimberly Bryant. Kimberly, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So, Kimberly, I appreciate that you're up early over in San Francisco, so thanks.
You're very welcome.
But you look fantastic. So I want to talk a little bit about this. I was just in South by Southwest with Frida Caper from the Caper Foundation, and also with Lisa Lee, who heads up their diversity program initiatives in Pandora. And some of the things that we were talking about was exactly this, that it's not just enough to have white women, but we also need to have more women of color, and we need just to have more diversity in general. Talk a little bit about the work that you're doing, but more importantly, make the case for it. Why do we need it?
Well, first of all, I think it's really important to look at the raw statistics. So since about the middle of the 80s, the number of women in receiving degrees in computer science has decreased drastically. And that's counterintuitive to what we would think it should be increasing. Our work with Black Girls Code is really to kind of change that paradigm and really get more women of color a seat at the tech table. Those numbers now with bachelor's degrees for women of color are less than 3%, and for Latinos that's less than 1%. So that is really something that's incredibly important for us to address as an industry, because women are not being really looked at as being technologists or innovators in the technology economy.
You know, and this is a conversation that I often use here in Changing America and keep drilling down, because oftentimes when people say, oh, well, why do we need more women? Why do we need more women of color at the table in Silicon Valley? One of the things I like to highlight, well, one is we're 52% of the population.
Exactly.
Two is it's an area where you have you're more or less, you know, Silicon Valley right now is minting millionaires and billionaires, so you're actually talking about wealth acquisition and legacy building, not just for yourself, but for your community. But lastly, when we look at the demographic shifts, we're just not prepared for those changes. And I say this because for the very first time this year, children of color surpassed white kids in kindergarten. So if we're not preparing our country, who happen to be people of color but who are American, to fill those positions, we're actually jeopardizing our future.
Absolutely. You know, I speak a lot about this issue, and I often talk about the business imperative. You know, with there being estimated 1.4 million STEM-related jobs by the next 10 years, where are we going to fill those? You know, we're really leaving, as a friend of mine, Van Jones, says, you know, talent on the table when we don't look at a diverse,
Van always comes up with these great little forks. I love it.
Oh, yeah.
Talent on the table.
But, you know, he's spot on. We're leaving a lot of talent on the table when we don't look at a broader array of candidates to fill these job positions. And that's why it's really important for businesses to broaden their candidate pool.
So one of the biggest challenges that when folks are funneled into these different positions within Silicon Valley is retention. So what they find themselves is, instead of developing leadership and mentorship so that they have talent, what they do is they open up the funnel at the very bottom, but the folks at the very bottom don't necessarily always make it to the top. What are some policies, or what are some things best practices that you've found that ensure that retention actually works and that we start funneling folks to the top of this industry?
Well, when I speak about the pipeline, I like to speak about it in a more holistic sense.
Yes.
So there's the K through 12 pipeline, then there's when we get women and people of color to college and post-secondary education, and then once we get them into those careers. So we have leaks all over that pipeline in every conceivable place. One of the things that really is not helping us to move the needle is that we have such a high attrition rate for women once they reach career fields. So one of the things
and
that
why is that? I think that that's important. Why is that?
Well, I think one of the things that, is obvious is these work environments are not very friendly. They're not very welcoming, and they're not very welcoming of women or diversity in the culture. And so we often hear things about finding culture fit, or companies looking for a culture fit, as opposed to creating more inclusive cultures that would be supportive for diverse perspectives from women and from underrepresented minorities being participants in those environments. So that may mean changing work policies, looking at how you promote, how you advance within the workplace. I think we can only look just a little bit of ways down the road to the trial that's going on now in the Valley, and see how some of the things, the issues and roadblocks that women face when they get to a certain point in their careers, which tends to stunt their growth and lead them to a path that exits the company.
And I want to mention that because oftentimes when folks say, well, it's, only if you really want this job are you going to get it. And I say this because oftentimes some of these companies don't have paid internship programs.
Right.
And they say, well, only if you're talented and you're going to sacrifice yourself. But part of it is that if you're oftentimes a kid of color or of low socioeconomic means, you may be talented, but you don't have the luxury of taking a summer off unpaid if you have to support your family. Those are quick fixes, but folks oftentimes don't realize that it's not a matter of whether they want it desperately enough. It's a matter of, well, I actually have to pay to make sure that my mom can actually put food on the table. And those are sometimes things that don't jive when it comes to Silicon Valley.
Absolutely. I think, in the Valley, we like to pride ourselves on being a meritocracy, and if only the strong can survive and those who really make it will. And that really doesn't take into account a lot of the structural bias that is in place that works against kids of color, and especially women of color that are often the breadwinners in their families. So the luxury of being able to take an unpaid internship is not really there when we're looking at this broader, more diverse community. And we need to take that into account.
And it's not, right, and it's not a meritocracy if your parents are footing the bill for you to take that summer internship,
oh,
right?
absolutely,
So,
absolutely.
Let's be honest. Okay, all right, that does it for us. Be sure to watch Changing America every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern. And be sure to catch me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Maria Teresa 1. See you next week.